listeners. Welcome to Shit That Goes On in Our Heads, the podcast where we normalize conversations around mental health.
That's right. I'm Dirty Skittles, and alongside my amazing co-host, G-Rex, we're here to share real stories and tips from our incredible guests.
Each episode, we deep dive into struggles and triumphs of mental health, offering practical advice and heartfelt support.
Because no one should feel alone in their journey. Join us as we break the stigma and build community of understanding and compassion.
Tune in and let's start talking about the shit that goes on in our heads. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Shit That Goes On in Our Heads. I'm part of this dynamic duo, Dirty Skittles, and I'm joined with my co-host,
G-Rex,
and our amazing guest, Jeff. Welcome to this chaotic circus, Jeff. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Dirty Skittles. Good to be with you. I'm just fine. How are the two of you?
Fucking hanging in there.
We're living the dream, man. You know, we record one Saturday a month, and this is episode number 3. So, but and we get a little bit more giddy as the day goes on. So we're good.
Yeah, you've caught us at prime time. Not sure if it's the best end of prime time, but we're here.
Good to know. And before we went on, I've already introduced the subject of the reverse up yours. So, you know, that should set the tone.
It should.
I'm going to figure out how to put that in the show notes. With a picture.
Did you see me hesitate when we did the 3? And then I was like, oh no, now this means...
No, I closed my eyes.
Yeah, because you could have stopped it too and given the English reverse up
double
yours.
Down.
Yeah.
I doubled down. I was like,
I don't know how to count.
Yeah, I know.
Isn't it 3, 2, 2? And then we say it, yeah.
It's all 3s. 3, 2, 1, done.
You look kind of like one of those rappers, you know.
Yeah. We're throwing up gang signals all of a sudden. Yeah. Oh my word. So are you drinking coffee? Are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker?
It's
nice. Love it. Where are you based out of?
I'm in Indianapolis, and we live on the White River in an area called Broad Ripple, which is an old part of town. It's actually was a village, so it's called Broad Ripple Village, and we're really lucky to live here. It's a beautiful area. I look out my back door windows and I see river and trees, and yet we're inside a big city with over 1 million people in an urban area and all the advantages of a big urban area, but you know, it looks like we're out in the country. So
that sounds beautiful. Beautiful.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Picturesque, if you will. Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in northern Indiana. So Indianapolis is in the center of the state, and my hometown was Goshen, which is up just below the Michigan line.
Oh. I was just thinking, I'm like, I feel like this is one of those areas where like you don't know it's there unless you're there, but I've never been to Indianapolis, so no idea.
It's because you're a homebody.
It used to be called Indian No Place because it was really a pretty boring city 30 years ago or so. But in the last few decades, it's really has grown. It's got a very vibrant cultural life. And so, yeah, it's a much better place to live now than when I first moved here, when I went to law school.
Oh, law school. Nice.
Yeah, that's what brought me here.
That's what's brought you to Indiana or to Michigan?
It's such a fascinating, he has such a fascinating story. I can't wait.
Okay, well, before you get into it, can I tell you that I always fantasize that instead of going to school, so I went to school for baking and pastry arts. Don't ask why. Anyways, but it was between law school and baking and pastry arts, and I chose cakes and cupcakes, and I think I regret it, to be honest. Like, I'm like, I want to be a lawyer. It would have been fun. But it sounds like it may be not fun. So tell us your story, Jeff. How was being a lawyer?
I would not recommend law to most people. It's got law school is difficult, boring, annoying, filled with boring and annoying people. So, the thing is, you can do a lot of very good things as a lawyer. You can, change people's lives for the better or for the worse. You can change your community for the better or the worse. And sometimes in really big cases, the whole nation or the world. So, that part of it, and I was able to do some important social justice cases and also a lot of individual cases where, it seemed like I helped people, got them out of a jam or, worked a problem out for them. But, you take your clients and your cases as they come in. And so I was not always on the side of truth, justice, and the American way. And that can be sort of awful. But the process of litigation is it's painfully slow and frustrating. And I was very glad when I could leave the law behind, which I was in it for 30 years.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah. Am I allowed to ask questions about that career?
About sexist?
No, about your career.
Oh, about
being a lawyer.
Why did I hear sexist in there? I'm not sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, we're the three of us are here to talk about whatever the two of you want to talk about.
I'm just curious. So I will kind of go off on side missions is what I call it. But so you practiced for 30 years. You said that sometimes you got to choose. Well, sometimes you were on the side of justice in the American way. But then you mentioned that, does that mean that you would sometimes represent somebody that maybe you didn't want to? Or what does that mean? What's the other side of it?
Well, I can give you two extreme examples. The very first case that was assigned to me, so right out of law school, and I was working initially for a legal services organization, which is a poverty law, social justice organization. And I was assigned a case to represent a mother whose two young children had been sexually abused, tied up with hangers by her boyfriend and abused. And it was my job to try to prevent her from losing her parental rights, because the state not only had criminally prosecuted both her and her boyfriend, but there was a civil administrative proceeding to take away her parental rights. And so, she was kind of a pathetic person who was just, not, she was, in those days, we would have said she was retarded, but mentally deficient, who was led by a much stronger personality boyfriend who was an awful criminal person. And on the one hand, I didn't think it would be the best thing for her rights to be totally terminated. On the other hand, I wasn't sure that maybe these two kids might be better off to just cut the strings entirely and get away from her. But I fought for her, and we worked out a deal where she had very limited visitation initially, and then eventually, if all things went well, the kids could come back and live with her, and it would take a minimum of a 2-year process for that to happen. So, was that a good thing or a bad thing? I also, in later years, defended sort of the other side, the boyfriend, who had sexually abused, raped a 9 and 11-year-old girl. And I ended up getting a better plea deal for him than the mother got. He got 6 years in prison. She got 8 years in prison. She didn't participate, but she was aware of it. Somehow that doesn't seem quite fair, but it was my job to get him the best deal I could, but I was not going to get him off. And that was one thing in the criminal cases I did, which only about 10% of my practice was criminal. I always told the person, the defendant, that if you did it, you're going to tell me, and I'll try to work out the best plea deal for you I can, but I'm not going to try to get you off if you're guilty, because it's your responsibility to accept responsibility for what you did. And then we'll try to help you out from that point on. So that, which is unusual. Most criminal defense lawyers would tell their clients, don't tell me if you did it. I don't want to know. All I want to know is your alibi. So.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how do you, so at the end, okay. When you're in those types of scenarios, you had mentioned it's painfully slow. So it doesn't sound like, you're kind of just there for a couple of hours and then you get to go home and it's all done and over with. These take time, right? Like you're spending a lot of your time in that moment or in that awful scenario.
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, at the height of my practice, I had something like 170 cases so I'm, juggling many balls, jumping from one case to another. So if a case is going to trial, then it gets my full attention. I was totally focused on it for hours, days, weeks. But when I'm not in trial, then I've got all these other things, the discovery, investigation, interviews, on and on. And that's the painfully slow process is after a case gets filed, moving it through. Like in Indianapolis, once a civil case is filed, it's 2 years before it gets to a jury trial, a year before it would get to a bench trial. Criminal cases tend to move quicker, but not a lot quicker. So, that's the painfully slow part when you can see how a case should work out. And, and it's like, okay, I see how this should work out for justice to be done, but we have to go through all these hoops and it takes forever and ever to get there. And then sometimes you don't get there, which is really frustrating.
How did you care for yourself during that time? Because I feel like that would take a huge mental toll.
Yeah. Well, actually, this kind of goes back to what G-Rex and I had talked about, which now seems like a long time ago. And it was painfully slow to get to this interview from our initial chat months ago. But from my teenage years, actually, when I first experienced depression, my sort of self-help remedy was exercise. And so I played a lot of sports growing up and all through college and in adult recreational leagues and so forth. And I would work out. I exercised every day. And I've been doing that, since I was a young and early adolescence. And that's one of the sort of basic regimens that I've always used to deal with anything that's depressing, annoying, and then another thing that hopefully is available to most people. I know it's not available to everybody, but to be part of a loving family and a positive community, to have people near you that you love and that love you, and then also to have friends that are a positive influence as opposed to dragging you down, which as a lawyer, that means don't hang out all the time with lawyers because they tend to be annoying, priggish, and self-centered and with big egos. So, which is not fair to all lawyers because, take me, for example, I'm not that way at all, but the G-Rex might disagree with that from our previous conversation, but I'm going to keep talking so she can't say that.
I loved our first conversation and I just loved your journey. So I'm good.
Anyway, so those were sort of the two basic things I did. And as G-Rex and I talked about, depression has been an ugly black cloud that's followed me since early adolescence, that I've had to figure out ways to deal with it over time. And one of our interesting points of conversation was I've written 14 books. And so the last book that I wrote that was published back in December was about, it's it's a fictionalized memoir. So it's a novel based on an actual experience of mine, which was hitchhiking from my hometown in northern Indiana to Key West and then over to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. But what inspired me to do that was to get out of a depressing situation. I was stuck in my hometown. I dropped out of college. I was working in a truly awful factory that Charles Dickens could have described as a hellhole from the 19th century, but was still there. And so I hit the road to have a big adventure. And so it was, I'm in this awful situation. What can I do to get out of it? So I'll hitchhike across the country. And that started another, I guess you could call it therapy, that I've employed my whole life. I've traveled to over 40 foreign countries, been in 49 states. And when I hit 40 and was experiencing a midlife crisis, which is it's just sort of an age-focused form of depression, my wife recognized the symptoms and knew what the cure should be. And she told me to go take a hike, and then threw down in front of me a brochure of trekking the Mount Everest Base Camp Trail. And so I went off to Nepal, the Mount Everest Base Camp Trail, fell in love with Nepal and the Himalayan mountains and the people that live in the high Himalayas. And that became a whole new theme in my life, as I started a foundation that I'm still running that works in a remote area in Nepal. And I became a trekking and mountaineering group leader and have been over there, 14 times. So it's kind of getting out of situations where normal life just is, allows that black cloud to start closing in, has been, the other way I've dealt with it.
I love that. What do you think it is about being active for you that works when you're feeling depressed and sort of getting you out of that headspace?
Well, I think there's at least two aspects to it. I think there's kind of a chemical neurological aspect that, your body is moving, or your brain is excited because you're in a new, different place, or you're running or biking or kayaking or, doing some physical exercise or trekking or, whatever, that there's a physiological charge that overcomes that, the depressing, whatever the chemistry is that causes the physiological feeling and effect of depression. And I think the other thing is that if you're doing something that you enjoy, even if it's painful, like, running or swimming long distance can be painful, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, this feels good, especially if you hit that second wind, or you're just, you're fit. And so it feels good to be able to do something where your body is just maxing out. It gives you a sort of charge. And I know that it's partly genetic and it's just partly brain chemistry, why some people are prone to depression and other people aren't. And so those of us who are, those are the sorts of simple things that we can do without taking drugs and without seeing a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, I have a question to ask you. When we first met, you were getting ready for hip surgery. And when you were having that downtime, what did you do to keep your mental state, at like kind of status quo?
Yeah, it was a really interesting experience. Maybe even worse than litigation as a lawyer, because it seemed like it was long and painful and annoying. But the really interesting part of that experience, in terms of the subject of your podcast was because I've always been so active and I'm, involved in a lot of organizations and I'm a president of a couple foundations and, just sort of have things on my calendar every day. And now I've had the surgery and I'm told you have to stay in bed for a week. And then the second week, you have to use a walker or a cane. And then the third week, you can get out, but you got to be really careful. And so the first few days, it was I was lonely. That was the strange experience for me is like I'm cut off from all of my social connections, my, the business stuff that I do in terms of the foundations, and I couldn't exercise at all. And that lasted for, several weeks. Well, there was physical therapy that started, but, that's doesn't really qualify as the kind of exercise I was used to doing. But so experiencing this loneliness was really interesting and kind of painful. And then when friends started contacting me, I was so grateful for any contact, whether it was by phone or by email or somebody coming over to see me and just sit with me and share a cup of coffee or something like that. And the positive effect it had is realizing how for me, this was a very temporary situation. And I knew it would only last for a short period of time. I thought, but, there's other people that it's not such a short situation, maybe, and other people that it is. And so I made a commitment that every week I was going to reach out to somebody that I knew of who was in a spot in life, a place in life that was lonely. And so I've maintained that commitment, and my surgery was February 21st. So this is almost, getting close to 3 months later. And I, tried to be very programmatic about thinking of somebody, at least one person each week to reach out to. And that's been very gratifying in a lot of ways. Sometimes I feel like, I'm busy and I don't want to bother with this, but no, I made that resolution. So I'm going to do it. And each time I do, it's that thing about doing good for somebody else does good for you. There's this mutuality that's uplifting, even when it's like, it's going to just feel like work. And then you let go and you do it. And, oh, no. Okay. That was really gratifying. I'm glad I did that.
Yeah. Feeds the soul.
Yeah. Feeds the soul. Right.
I have a random question. What has been the hardest lesson you've learned so far in your life?
Can I take the Fifth Amendment on that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to.
The hardest lesson, nothing is coming to mind. There's a lot of hard lessons I've learned. I've had several near-death experiences, like hit on a motorcycle way down in Mexico and being operated on in this Red Cross hospital with a lizard running across the ceiling and blood and guts and bandages all over the floor. But, the situations like that, and I've, encountered because of living a fairly adventurous life, the situations like that can bring out the best or the survival instinct as opposed to wilting and just kind of curling up in a fetal position because you have to cope. If you don't cope, you're going down. And not just you're going to be depressed and lonely. It's, it's a really crucial situation. I got very sick once on a 21,000 foot high mountain and I could barely move because the third stage of high mountain sickness is ataxia, where you lose control of your muscles. You just sort of turn to rubber. And so, okay, you have to go down, but you can't even walk. How are you going to do this? And so I had made sort of a commitment that I would, no matter what happened to me, I would never call for a rescue for me, because that puts up in the mountains, because that puts the rescuers in danger. So, I did. So, I managed somehow putting one foot in front of the other to make it down. And there's a medical clinic at 14,000 feet. So I managed to get there and got taken care of. So, but I'll tell you, this is kind of just slightly off the question you asked, but it reminded me of something which is actually a chapter in that last book I mentioned. So I had gotten to Key West, sort of reached my hitchhiking goal, and I was heading back, and I was in a place where I was feeling very lonely. Key West turned out to be sort of disappointing, and I had a really awful experience there because I had hooked up with a guy who was coming out of combat in Vietnam. So this is in 1972. And he had PTSD, and he was a heroin addict, and he had gone cold turkey, and he was having DTs, and it was just awful. But we got him home, and then instead of staying around to try to help him out, which he really didn't need any help from me, I fled. I just basically ran away from that situation instead of sticking around in Key West like I planned. So I hitchhiked to University of Miami. I'm sitting there, and I'd been there a couple of days. I'm all by myself, and I'm feeling lonely and sad. Mm-hmm. And these two very pretty young women all of a sudden just appeared and sat down beside me. And one of them had a guitar, and she's strumming this guitar. And they both look at me and give me these beatific smiles and start talking. And after a while, they say, "Would you like to come with us?" I was like, "Would I?" It's like, talk about angels from heaven. So I said, yeah. And I followed them. And they talked about a commune, that they lived in a commune. And I was thinking, oh, wow, people running around naked and growing vegetables and living off the land, and hippies and, sex, drugs, rock and roll in a commune. But instead, we get on this old school bus, and it drives for about an hour, and there's a whole bunch of other people on the bus. And it turns out they're taking me to a Children of God compound. The Children of God, it's still around, but it's a cult, which its leaders were accused of sexual abuse. It was a truly awful cult in a lot of ways. It expected you to give all of your material wealth to the cult, mm-hmm. and then it would assign you menial tasks to do. And if you were attractive, either male or female, in the leader's opinion, they would send you out to do what they called flirty fishing. And so I got flirty fished by these two pretty young women. And once I realized what I got myself into, I was, okay, I got to get out of here. And so I went from, okay, I'm sad, I'm depressed, to, oh, wow, this is unbelievably lucky and beautiful, to, oh, crap, I'm in a trap, because the compound was in Fort Lauderdale. I didn't even, I wasn't really paying attention to where we were going. I didn't know where I was, but we were in this great big house, and that had two outbuildings of a male and female dormitories and a high wooden fence surrounding it. So there was no obvious way. And with, not exactly guards, but two people were assigned to me to be my friends, to be with me every minute of the day. So I'm thinking, I got to get out of here, but I'm being watched the whole time. Anyway, so I waited till about 2 o'clock or so in the morning, everybody's asleep, and I escape. But very long-winded answer to a bad situation and a problem to solve.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that story.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Read the book. It's a chapter.
Yes. Tell us the name of the book so we can, any other listener besides me that's fascinated by this story, where can we read it?
The title is A Hitchhiker's Big Adventure. And it's the easiest way to get it is just go to Amazon and either, input my name or input the title of the book. So, or I have a website. You can go through the website, although it just takes you to the Amazon buy page for it.
I have one more question, but G-Rex, I don't want to keep hogging up his time.
Well, that's fine. It's okay because I got to have an amazing conversation with him. So.
I'm jealous.
So, Jeff, what keeps you humble?
I'm not sure I am. People have told me that I come across that way. Other people have told me I'm a conceited prick. But so I'm not sure that I can say I am humble to answer that question. But I guess in a way, I recognize, because I've tested my own limitations, I definitely know I have limitations as I'm getting older. The sort of the end point is getting shorter. So the limitations are getting more pronounced. But I was raised in a family that was very committed to, you could say, philanthropy. Very committed to, you've been given a lot. You didn't do anything to get born. That was a gift. You didn't do anything to have this body, this brain, this consciousness. It's all a gift. All of the things in the world that you get to experience and benefit from, you didn't make them. It's a gift. The egocentric people, like our former president, who claim, that it's all about them, they did it all, they're wrong. Even the most brilliant minds, the greatest athletes, the best musicians, sure, they have wonderful talents. They worked really hard to master their craft, and they contributed a tremendous amount to the world, but they were given so much to get them started and to help them along the way. And so, I was taught that lesson by my family, by teachers, by Sunday school and church. And I take it seriously. And so I've always felt like I have an obligation to give back. And like we were talking about, nourishing the soul, it's not entirely unselfish because it feels good. So I taught a class for a number of years about philanthropy at 2 local universities here in Indianapolis. And that's important to me. And to the extent that I can claim any modicum of humble modesty or humility, I guess that's how I would put it.
That's a great answer. And my one final question I have is, between your midlife crisis and now, did it strengthen the relationship with your wife? Did she notice those changes within you, seeing you be more happy, seeing a small glimmer in your eyes of something that made you happy versus what was dragging you down?
Yeah, I mean, she's a wonderful person in so many ways, and my life has been so much improved and benefited by her. I mean, so yeah, she knew that I needed something, because at the time we had 2 young kids. I was the head of a small law firm and a real estate. I was still trying to play sports, and this was not the life I wanted. I wanted to be married, middle-aged father, focused on doing business and making money and all that. I wanted to live the life of an adventurer. And well, I loved the life I had, and ways. I mean, it was great doing good in law. I loved being a dad. It was missing. And it was that sense of adventure, because even though we would take trips as a family, hadn't had a big adventure in quite a few years since my boys were born. And I didn't think I wanted to, like I wanted to, as soon as I could, I wanted to get home and be with my kids and be with my family. And yet there was unconsciously this growing sense of this isn't exactly right. And so Alicia recognized that, kind of kicked me in the butt and said, go do this. And then after that, we both agreed we would travel separately every year. I'd go to the Himalayas. She'd go to England. She loves England or Italy. And then we'd take trips together as a family. And so it definitely hurt my recognition of her recognition, I think, helped to bring us back together, because we were growing apart, even though we were spending more time together than we had when we were younger. And so it's in a lot of long time married people will say this, but it's actually true. I mean, the longer we've been married, the deeper and more loving our relationship has become, and is still becoming. So, yeah.
I love that.
My last question for you is, what's next? Do you have any goals you want to accomplish that you haven't done so already?
Yeah, actually, my wife and I were just talking about this, and she's still working. I mean, I retired from the law, 10 years ago, and have done a lot of other things, but it's like she would ask me that, and I said, I don't know. There's nothing more I want to do. I could die today and be happy. I've lived the life I wanted, and it's not like I want to die, but on the other hand, I wouldn't mind if I did, because what else is there? My kids are grown. I've done all these wonderful adventures. The two foundations I've been very involved with are very well. They don't really look forward to gift a particular that are paid.
She'll join. Oh, she's back.
Sorry. My something happened with my computer. Are we good?
You're fine.
Can we all hear me?
You're
Okay.
fine.
Good.
Yes. I stayed recording on my side, so you're good.
Should I keep going or just?
Yeah,
keep going.
Keep picking up where you were going.
Well, I was just going to, just this last year, our big project was we endowed a scholarship at the little college in my hometown in my mom's name, because my mom was an early woman journalist when it was very tough to be a woman and a journalist. And she rose up to become the city editor of the local newspaper. And Goshen College has a very good journalism communications department. So we've endowed a scholarship there every year ad infinitum will fund one student's or two students' education through college. So that's, very gratifying. And that's what I do look forward to, coming up with those, discovering those sorts of things that we can do with this big pile of money that the law gave me.
That's awesome. I love that, though. I love that that's what you're choosing to do next. So thank you. I appreciate you taking the time and chatting with us and letting me kind of poke your brain a little bit about just legal fun stuff.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Yes. Enjoy your Saturday.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys. Hi, all. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm G-Rex.
And I'm Dirty Skittles.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. We'd love to listen to your feedback.
We can't do this without you guys. It's okay to be not okay. Just make sure you're talking to someone.